then you think about the hypocrisy of Vince, because it comes out in this episode and then it comes out in the second episode. You know, the death of the territories. And Vince saying, well, it's business, and I did what I had to do, and I went and grabbed these people, and then I went and promoted in those areas, and he broke the handshake agreement. I don't have a problem with that because wrestling was going to go there anyway. He just did it first. But the hypocrisy is the handshake stuff because Vince had used handshake agreements. So he couldn't even hide the double standard of that. In the second episode, they talk, well, they were stealing our talent. No, they weren't. You were pissed that they signed Hogan. That whole story gets told of, they're going to flip from Hogan to Warrior. And then that doesn't work, so they go back to Hogan. But they're doing so with like a war backed behind it. And let's go with the stereotypical route. And Iran, we hate Iran, so we'll make Sergeant Slaughter and Iraqi sympathizers. And Hulk's the great American. And they end up going back to Hulk. And at WrestleMania 8, what'd they do? Well, it could be Hulk's. It's in the promotion. It's a double main event in what could be Hulk Hogan's final match. Then he main events. And then Warrior comes back. And then at WrestleMania 9, Hogan comes back. Then what happens? He ends up in the main event of WrestleMania 9. And then he's gone. And Vince is pissed he leaves. Even though Vince took Hulk Hogan from a territory, from Memphis with Randy Savage. He took Junkyard, and that's fine. Go get paid. Go get your people. I've talked about this recently. I hope there are bidding wars for wrestlers across multiple companies now, because that's where we're at. AEW has brought financial competitiveness to the game. It's getting people paid. But to then bitch and complain that they took Hogan and they took Savage and they took Hall and Nash, well, pay them. Fucking pay them. If you couldn't keep them, tough shit. It's so hypocritical. Like, it's so obviously hypocritical. That's not fair. No, it's not fair to you. Vince, when backed into a corner, how many times do you see it through the documentary Phil Donahue show with the steroid trial and the Ring Boys and all that stuff? The Armin Katayan interview, the Bob Costas interview. He's literally just talking to someone and he can't handle himself. He's getting in Costas' face. He's knocking Armin Katayan's papers out of his hands. He's squirming all over the place on Phil Donahue. Because he couldn't control the situation. He couldn't handle it. And when that happens, he lashes out. He talks through that about how he could feel himself getting, like, that's not a stable human being. I will say, in all seriousness, as much as I'm going to knock him, and fairly so, the stories that he told about being beaten by his stepfather, indicating that he was sexually abused by his mother, not meeting his father until he was 12, and then saying, I pushed all that stuff behind me. That man has mental health issues. That man has always had mental health issues. And it is a shame that there weren't ways to help with that. And I know that mental health has become way more important in probably the last 5 to 10 years than it's ever been before. And there are more ways to help with that. And you can go to therapy and you can take medication. You can have conversations you need to have. And it's not a macho thing versus a man, woman thing. But it's very clear Vince just was like, nope, got to handle it. That's life. And that permeated into everything else he did in business and his own family. Dennis says, I don't even know if he expects it. He just tries to see if people will fall for it and grabs the most convenient argument at hand. It's why he's always seemed to treat people better that left him better. Yeah, there is something to Vince where he appreciates you combating him. I said this all the time, and I hope this has changed. The only time you're going to piss off people who are in the wrestling business in a position like Vince or Bruce or anybody is if you mess with their show. If you question what's going on. And by that, I mean, you could get in trouble with the law. But if you make your shot and it doesn't mess with the booking, if you're a moneymaker for the company, it got overlooked. If you're in a position where they need you, it gets overlooked. Happened with the Usos when they got in trouble. Happened with Jack Swagger before WrestleMania when he wrestled Del Rio. Now, we don't know if there were fines or anything like that, but they kept him going. We also don't want to mess with our plans. And I'm not saying everybody needs to be definitely punished. And, of course, it's, you see where legal proceedings take you. But if you mess with the show, you question the show, show, then you're ostracized. Then you're in trouble. I know what happens in sports as well. People get a second chance if they're good. But, God, that is such a thing in wrestling. As long as you don't mess with the show, you usually stick around. I'm hoping that gets pushed out more. You think about the stuff that they talked about with Pat Patterson and Tony Atlas. And I'll say this about Tony Atlas. I know what he said. Tony Atlas is a great example of the fact that documentary did not have a reliable narrator. And more often than not, wrestling documentaries do not have reliable narrators. Everybody's working. When in doubt, they're working. Even when they're not supposed to be working, they're working. That's Hogan. Hogan was promoting himself in insane and ridiculous ways for his entire life. I caught him in a lie on the bump once. It's one of my favorite things I've ever done in my career because he looked like a fucking idiot, because he is. Because not enough people called him on his shit. And people would sit down for these documentaries and spurt out the same bullshit and crap and tell the same stories. And that happened all throughout this thing. Hey, this is Matt Camp. Thanks for checking out one of our recent clips from the Wrestling Mat. Why is someone so close to The Rock kind of throwing Cody under the bus?
Yeah, a lot of people won't engage with Jim Cornette. I did, just because I have a mark for Jim Cornette. And
Please subscribe right now. Hit the like and turn on notifications so you don't miss a thing. And I think you should listen to your TV partners. Let me tell you about WWE and a little insight. More subscribers means more content. And make sure you follow us on social media at WrestlingMat23 on both Twitter and Instagram.